Welcome back, everyone, and we are going to get into Act 3. So, as you know, just to reiterate, Act 1 is typically the exposition in Shakespeare. We get an introduction to the characters and the basic plot and setting. Act 2 is the rising action, which we have finished reading. And as you know, at the end of the scene 4, at the end of the act, in scene 4, we have a character who refuses to attend Macbeth's coronation. Now, let me just explain why Macbeth is being crowned king. Prince of Cumberland, Malcolm, who would be the next in line, runs away. Him and Donalbain have tried to keep themselves safe, and so they've gone to England and Ireland. And they've separated also to keep themselves safe, okay? Macduff has refused to attend Macbeth's coronation, and so we can assume that he is a little bit suspicious of the most recent events, okay? And now we're going to get into Act 3, which, as you know, is the climax, okay? And so things are going to move pretty quick. Scene 1 is a little bit longer. Scene 2 and 3 are short, okay? And then scene 4, 5, and 6 are also pretty short. All right, so we're going to start with scene 1. Now, at the beginning of the scene, you'll notice that Banquo is on the stage by himself. He's thinking out loud here, okay? Banquo says, "Thou hast it now, King Cawdor, Glamis, all as the weird women promised. And I fear thou played most foully for it. Yet it was said it should not stand in thy posterity, but that myself should be the root and father of many kings. If there come truth from them, as upon thee, Macbeth, their speeches shine, why by the verities on thee made good, may they not be my oracles as well, and set me up in hope? But hush, no more." So Banquo is thinking out loud here, okay? And when he says, "You have it all, King Cawdor Glamis," he's talking about Macbeth, and he's kind of musing here that the weird women have promised him these things and they have all come true, except he says, "I fear thou played most foully for it," right? He goes on to say, "Yet it was said it should not stand in thy posterity." It shouldn't stand forever in your family. Okay, but that myself should be the root and father of many kings, right? So by the verities are truths. By the truth on thee made good, may they not be my oracles as well? Banquo is considering the prophecy for him might also come true. And we have met Banquo's son before. His name is Fleance, okay? So at this moment in time, as he is kind of musing out loud, there is a senate that sounds, and that is basically a trumpet. Now Macbeth enters, except he this time is entering as king. I love the movie version, which of course I'm unable to show you. He rides in on a horse, and I think that this shows that he is rising in power and rank. Lady Macbeth is at his side, and then of course we have Lennox Roth, lords, and attendants. So he has people all around him. Macbeth says, "Here's our chief guest." Lady Macbeth, "If he had been forgotten, it had been a gap in our great feast, and all thing unbecoming." She is really kissing butt here, okay? So she's saying if we forgot about Banquo, it would be that something is missing, right, for our great feast that they have the intention of holding this evening, and I'll get to that in a moment. "Tonight we behold a solemn supper, sir, and I'll request your presence." So Macbeth is inviting him to their solemn supper this evening. "Let your highness command upon me, to the which my duties are with a most indissoluble tie, forever knit. Ride you this afternoon?" "Ay, my good lord." So Macbeth is asking if Banquo is going riding somewhere, okay? And Banquo is saying that yes, he intends to ride this afternoon. Macbeth says, "We should have else desired your good advice, which still hath been both grave and prosperous. in this day's council, but we'll take tomorrow. Is it far you ride? Okay, now Macbeth has said, okay, we would have liked your advice at our meeting this afternoon. However, we'll talk tomorrow, okay? And then he asks him, are you riding far? This is curious, right? Banquo says, as far, my lord, as will fill up the time twixt this and supper, right? So as far, my lord, as it will fill up the time between right now and supper time. Go not my horse the better, I must become a borrower of the night for a dark hour or two. Fail not our feast, Macbeth tells Banquo. Don't miss our banquet. And Banquo says, my lord, I will not. Macbeth says, we hear our bloody cousins are bestowed in England and in Ireland, not confessing their cruel parricide, filling their hearers with strange invention. So who are our bloody cousins that are bestowed in England and Ireland, who have apparently, according to Macbeth, committed a cruel parricide? A parricide is the killing of your parents, right? So he's obviously talking about Malcolm and Donalbain. Okay? So, but of that tomorrow, when therewithal we shall have cause of state craving us jointly, hie you to your horse, adieu, till you return at night. Goes Fleance with you? So Macbeth is now asking him, is your son going with you? Okay, so I'm hoping that your wheels in your brain are starting to turn right now. Why is Macbeth so curious about where Banquo and his son are going? Banquo says, aye, my good lord, our time does call upon us. And he excuses himself. Macbeth says, I wish your horses swift and sure of foot, and so I do commend you to their backs. Farewell. Banquo exits, and he then addresses everyone who is around him. Let every man be master of his time till 7 at night. To make society the sweeter welcome, we will keep ourselves till supper time alone. While then, God be with you. So everybody, do what you will until 7 o'clock, and that's what time we will meet for dinner. Now all of the lords leave except for Macbeth, who is left with a servant. He says to the servant, Sirrah, a word with you? Attend those men our pleasure. They are, my lord, without the palace gate. Bring them before us. He is instructing the servant to bring the men who are waiting outside the gate to him. And in this moment, Macbeth now is going to think to himself. So this is a soliloquy. He's thinking out loud. Very important soliloquy here. This will definitely be on your quiz. He says, to be thus is nothing but to be safely thus. Our fears in Banquo stick deep, and in his royalty of nature reigns that which would be feared. 'Tis much he dares, and to that dauntless temper of his mind he hath a wisdom that doth guide his valour to act in safety. There is none but he whose being I do fear, and under him my genius is rebuked, as it is said Mark Antony's was by Caesar. He chid the weird sisters when they first put the name of king upon me, and bade them speak to him. Then, prophet-like, they hailed him father to a line of kings. Upon my head they placed a fruitless crown, and they put a barren sceptre in my grip. Thence to be wrenched with an unlineal hand, no son of mine succeeding. If it be so, for Banquo's issue have I filed my mind. For them, the gracious Duncan, have I murdered, put rancors in the vessel of my peace. Only for them, and mine eternal jewel, given to the uncommon enemy of man, to make them kings, the seeds of Banquo kings. Rather than so, come fate into the list, and champion me to the utterance. Who's there? Okay, so maybe I should have stopped periodically in this soliloquy here, but let's just go back and kind of read more closely. He says, to be this is nothing. To be this king, right, is nothing but to be safely king. Okay, so what is it that he is concerned about? He is concerned about whether or not he will maintain this position of king. He says that he is afraid of Banquo, right? His fears stick deep. And in his royalty of nature, right? Banquo is a good guy. And so he has reason to fear him. 'Tis much he dares, and to that dauntless temper of his mind, he hath a wisdom that his wisdom guides his bravery, and he acts in safety, right? Banquo had initially said to Macbeth that he would help him so long as he keeps his allegiance clear and his bosom franchise. Okay, so he's not going to do anything dirty. Okay, so he is a noble character, and Macbeth is aware of this. Okay, so he's expressing his concern about Banquo. Okay, he continues to say why, right? Banquo had chided the Weird sisters when they had put king upon me, right? He insisted that they speak to him, and then they hailed him father to a line of kings. So only because Banquo had said, hey, 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 sure, he's going to be king, but what of me? Okay, Banquo is pointing to that. And then I was highlighting this as I was reading, but he says, upon my head they placed a fruitless crown. In other words, the crown will bear no fruit, right? His children will not wear his crown. And upon in his hand they put a barren meaning scepter, right? I mean, barren meaning empty. His scepter that he will hold in his hand is empty. Okay, thence to be wrenched with an unlineal hand, no son of mine succeeding. Okay, he's expressing all of his concerns about how Banquo's prophecy suggests that Macbeth's crown will not remain in his family. If it be so, for Banquo's issue have I defiled my mind, right? He's kind of messed up his mind, and we already know this. As soon as Macbeth committed murder, he loses the ability to say amen and to sleep. Immediately feels remorse and guilt, and he no longer experiences peace in his mind, right? So he's saying for Banquo's success, right? Has he dirtied his own mind, right? For them, the gracious Duncan have I murdered, and put rancors in the vessel of my peace, only for them. And I love this part here. If you look in your book, what is mine eternal jewel? In the book, it says that it is his soul, right? He has given his soul to the common enemy of man. Who is the common enemy of man? We saw this also in Chaucer, the devil, right? He's saying that he's done all of this not for his own good, but for Banquo and his family, right? To make them kings, the seeds of Banquo kings. Okay, so all of this is an expression of his discomfort with Banquo. Okay, and then of course now the servant comes back, and notice who he comes back with: two murderers. Okay, kind of reminds me of the Tiger King a little bit, right? With the hire for murder. To the servant, now go to the door and stay there till we call. Obviously, he doesn't want the servant to know what he's about to talk about with these two murderers. Was it not yesterday we spoke together? So Macbeth is now saying to these murderers, didn't we talk yesterday? So presumably there's been a conversation that we have not been a part of. Okay. Now the murderers and Macbeth are continuing here. It was, so please your highness. Macbeth says, well then, now, have you considered of my speeches? Know that it was he in the times past which held you so under fortune, which you thought had been our innocent self. This I made good to you in our last conference, passed in probation with you, how you were borne in hand, how crossed the instruments, who wrought with them, and all things else that might to have a soul and to a notion crazed. Say, thus did Banquo. Okay, so I'm going to zero in on a certain line here. Okay, know that it was he in times past which held you so under fortune. So that's a little bit more easy to grapple with here. Who do you think Macbeth is trying to convince these murderers that has held them so under fortune, who's brought misfortune to them? He's trying to convince them that Banquo has ruined their positions in life. Okay? He can be very persuasive, I imagine. The murderer said, "You made it known to us." Macbeth says, "I did so, and went further, which is now our point of second meeting. Do you find your patience so predominant in your nature that you can let this go? Are you so gospel to pray for this good man and for his issue, whose heavy hand hath bowed to you the grave and beggared yours forever?" So again, you could see rhetorical questions. Whenever you see rhetorical questions, they're really not meant to be answered. He is here trying to persuade in the same way that Lady Macbeth earlier was using rhetorical questions to persuade Macbeth to kill King Duncan. Macbeth is now using rhetorical questions here to persuade the murderers to want to kill Banquo, and not necessarily for Macbeth. He's trying to convince them to do it because Banquo has done something to them to keep them so under fortune. First murderer says, "We are men, my liege." Okay, presumably they also do not want to hurt Banquo. In the catalogue you go for men, as hounds and greyhounds, mongrels, spaniels, curs, sloughs, water rugs, and demi-wolves are clept all by the name of dogs. So these are all different breeds of dogs, right? And he's saying within the category of dogs, there are many different types of dogs, okay? The valued file distinguishes the swift, the slow, the subtle, the housekeeper, the hunter, every one according to the gift which bounteous nature hath in him closed, whereby he does receive particular addition from the bill that writes them all alike, and so of men. Okay, so he says here that there are swift dogs, right? There are slow dogs, there are subtle dogs, there are housekeepers, hunters, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and so of men. Okay, just like there are many types of dogs, there are also many types of men. Okay, so he says, "We are men, my liege." Okay, and Macbeth is using a persuasive tactic here to convince them that they're essentially low on the totem pole, so to speak. So he says, "Now, if you have a station in the file, not in the worst rank of manhood, say it, and I will put that business in your bosom whose execution takes your enemy off, grapples you to the heart, and loves of us, who wear our health but sickly in his life, which in his death were perfect." Okay? So he continues here by trying to tell them that they are the worst of manhood. Okay? And continues to convince them that they need to execute their enemy. The second murderer says, "I am one, my liege, whom the vile blows and buffets of the world hath so incensed, okay, that I am reckless what I do in spite the world." So I am one, my lord, okay, whom the world has made so angry that I don't care what else I do in spite the world. All right, so he's starting to be persuaded and convinced. The first murderer says, "And I another, so weary with disasters, tugged with fortune, that I would set my life on any chance to mend it or be rid on it." The other murderer also agrees that his life is so weary with disasters and tugged with fortune. So he's not had a good life either. You can tell that these two men are kind of like, again, I'm going to say like bottom of the totem pole. They're not your most admirable characters here. Macbeth says, "Both of you know Banquo was your enemy." "True, my lord. So is he mine, and in such bloody distance that every minute of his being thrusts against my nearest of life. And though I could be bare-faced power, sweep him from my sight, and bid my will avouch it, yet I must not, for certain friends that are both his and mine, whose loves I may not drop, but wail his fall, who I myself struck down, and thence it is that I to your assistance do make love, masking the business from the common eye for sundry weighty reasons. Okay, what is Macbeth saying here? He's saying that Banquo is also my enemy, okay? But even though I can sweep him from my sight, he can if he wanted to. He can't. Why? Because they have friends that are the same, and he doesn't want to upset them, right? He doesn't want to um, make enemies of them, right? And so he's asking for their assistance in this matter. Okay, the second murderer says, "We shall, my lord, perform what you command us." Okay, so they understand now that they are being hired to basically, let's say like the mob does, whack Banquo. Though our lives, okay, so he's about to say something and then Macbeth interrupts him, okay. Your spirits shine through you. Within this hour at most, I will advise you where to plant yourselves, acquaint you with the perfect spy of the time, the moment on it, for it must be done tonight, and something from the palace. Always thought that I require a clearness, right? So what does that mean? Macbeth is saying that this cannot be caught, right? So they have to do it in such a way that's very clandestine and secretive and stealthy. And with him to leave no rubs nor botches in the work. Fleance, his son that keeps him company, whose absence is no less material to me than is his father's, must embrace the fate of that dark hour. Resolve, your, resolve yourselves apart. I'll come to you anon. So what is Macbeth asking here? Not only for Banquo to be murdered, but also for Fleance to be murdered. And this is obviously because of the witch's prophecies. Okay? The murderers agree and they say, "We are resolved, my lord." Macbeth says, "I'll call upon you straight. Abide within." Now the murderers exit. It is concluded. Banquo, thy soul's flight, if it find heaven, must find it out tonight.